Rain needled the windows while the voicemail icon blinked like an accusation. Maya Collins pressed play, and a brittle voice said, "This is Nurse Delgado, I need to correct a record." The wall clock stuttered, and Maya said, "Correct what exactly?" The voice said, "The woman released to you was not Ruth Collins." Silence swelled like a storm, and Maya said, "You are lying." The voice shook and said, "I wish I were." The name Ruth felt heavier than the room, and Maya said, "Then, where is my mother?" The message ended in a click that sounded like a door sealing shut. The apartment smelled of rain and coffee gone cold, and she whispered, "I buried a stranger." Thunder rolled, and a framed photo of Ruth leaned as if listening. Maya grabbed her coat and said, "Noah will pick up," but doubt burned hotter than grief. Somewhere inside the storm a different life tapped to be let in. Morning arrived like a tired apology, and the storm left a film on everything it touched. Maya said, "I buried the wrong woman," and the words tasted metallic. Noah Park answered on speaker and said, "I am coming over." The apartment seemed to shrink around the truth, and Maya said, "The nurse called it a correction." Noah said hospitals correct addresses, not mothers. She stared at the bracelet and said, "It has my name." He said, "We will track her, and we will breathe between steps." The kettle clicked off, and grief sloshed under the calm. Maya said, "If Ruth is alive, then the funeral was a theft." Noah said, "Then we return what was stolen and take back what was ours." The clinic smelled like lemon cleaner and old books that had survived storms. Dr. Evelyn Shaw said, "Repeat the claim without flinching." Maya said, "My mother may be alive." The syllables shook like loose glass in a frame. Dr. Shaw said, "Your body believes before your mind agrees." Maya said, "What if the truth ruins the little I have?" Dr. Shaw said, "Pain hates light and you are turning on lamps." Maya said, "Victor will say I am grasping." Dr. Shaw said, "Victor's doubt is not a compass." A clock ticked without mercy, while hope set a fragile table. Maya said, "If I search, I might find myself or lose her twice." Victor Hale arrived with the chill of a door left open in winter. Victor said, "You started calling hospitals again." Maya said, "A nurse admitted a mistake." His laugh scraped like sandpaper on bone. Victor said, "Grief rewires memory, not facts." Maya said, "Then explain the bracelet." He said, "You want a villain, and I refuse the part." She held his gaze and said, "You chose silence when sound mattered." Victor said, "I chose stability when you chose storms." The old history rose like smoke, and the room forgot how to breathe. Maya said, "I am done breathing other people's air." The storage unit tasted of metal and old rain, and the light buzzed like a trapped fly. Maya said, "Ruth kept everything in boxes labeled by years." Noah said, "We start with the year you vanished from yourself." A lid slid free and hospital forms fluttered like startled birds. Maya said, "Here is a discharge under Collins, then a transfer under Hale." The papers trembled between her fingers and the bracelet matched a number. Noah said, "These are breadcrumbs the storm forgot to drown." Maya said, "If I follow, I meet the person I was meant to be." The air felt thinner, and the lock clicked like a distant answer. Maya whispered, "Hold, Mom, I am coming." The records office smelled like toner and unasked questions. Maya said, "You called to correct a record." Nurse Delgado said, "There was a transfer and a mislabel." Noah said, "A transfer to where?" The clerk typed, and screens reflected like cold water. Maya said, "I signed a release after a funeral." Nurse Delgado said, "The release references a patient number, not a person." Maya said, "My mother is a person." Noah said, "Print every place that number touched." The printer coughed and dread arrived with each page. The clerk said, "Graybridge Care was listed as a destination, then redacted." Maya said, "Who ordered the redaction?" Nurse Delgado said, initials VH over a stamped letterhead. Noah, said Victor. Hale keeps writing endings for other people. Maya said, he does not get to write this one. The funeral home felt overpolished, as if grief were furniture to buff. The director said, identification followed procedure. Maya said, procedure buried a stranger under my mother's name. Noah said, show us the chain of custody. Folders opened like mouths that could only hum. Maya said, this tag number is not the bracelet number. The director said, a courier swapped forms after a late call. Noah said, who called late? The director said, a man representing family stability and legal clarity. Maya said, Victor thinks control is love, and he is wrong. Silence settled in the parlor flowers, and guilt rustled like cellophane. The director said, I can release the courier log if served a request. Noah said, then consider this a request with a pen. Maya said, and consider this a promise that I will not stop. The county office buzzed with old fluorescents and newer lies. Lila Chen said, I am the intake coordinator and I do not love redactions. Maya said, a patient number trails us like a shadow. Noah said, we need its source. Lila Chen said, numbers hide people until someone insists on names. Maya said, I insist. Lila Chen said, Greybridge Care is off the highway, private quiet. Noah said, who pays their quiet? Lila Chen said, a trust linked to Hale Consolidated. Maya said, Victor has been staging my life as an emergency drill. Lila Chen said, bring consent, bring courage, and expect locked doors. Maya said, if a door is locked, we knock until wood becomes memory. Noah said, then let us buy coffee and a crowbar worth of patience. Lila Chen said, write my name on the request and I will answer phone calls. The parking lot simmered under noon heat and bad timing. Victor said, you are making a spectacle out of unresolved sorrow. Maya said, I am making a path. Noah said, we have logs and a destination. Victor said, Greybridge is a private facility, and you are trespassers by intent. Maya said, you redacted my mother like she was noise. Victor said, I redacted confusion to protect you. Noah said, protection without consent is conquest. Victor said, you will regret this rebellion when the truth disappoints. Maya said, disappointment is lighter than a lie that lasts years. Tires crackled, and the sun carved hard shadows between every sentence. Victor said, I loved Ruth when love meant paperwork and patience. Maya said, then help me sign the right forms. Victor said, I will not help you break what I glued together. Noah said, then watch us build without you. The map app traced a thin blue thread toward Greybridge and a thicker fear. Dr. Shaw said, name what you feel, and it will not own you. Maya said, I feel like a door that forgot how to open. Noah said, you are opening anyway. Dr. Shaw said, grief builds fortresses from ordinary days. Maya said, if I meet her, I might shatter. Dr. Shaw said, shattering is how edges become honest. Noah said, we have consent forms and a request letter. Dr. Shaw said, carry water and kindness, then carry your name. Maya said, I am ready to be recognized by the person who taught me mine. The road unfurled, and every mile sounded like a heart deciding to continue. Dr. Shaw said, call me after the first door, even if it is only a gate. Maya said, I will call, even if my voice shakes. Noah said, then we drive until the blue thread becomes a place. The gates of Greybridge Care rose like tired guardians of forgotten truths. Maya said, this place looks less like a refuge and more like a vault. Noah said, vaults still hold what matters. A guard said, visiting hours ended. Maya said, records demand no hour. The clipboard trembled under her stare. The guard said, authorization only. Noah slipped the stamped request across the glass. Maya said, This is my mother's number. The guards squinted as if numbers were knives. The lock clicked, reluctant as bone. Maya whispered, if she is here, she is breathing my air again. Noah said, then every breath counts. The gate creaked open and grief turned into steel within her chest. The lobby smelled of bleach and resignation. Maya said, I expected comfort, not concrete painted beige. Noah said, comfort hides too much, maybe beige is honest. A receptionist said, whom do you wish to see? Maya said, Ruth Collins, admitted under patient number 8147. The receptionist typed as though truth could be delayed by keystrokes. What he dites? Maya said, I am her daughter. Silence lingered, brittle and cruel. The receptionist said, we have a Ruth, but records show she is unresponsive. Maya's hands clenched the counter. She said, unresponsive does not mean absent. Noah said she is still here. The receptionist said, room 212, West Wing. A. The keys slid across the counter like a dare. The West Wing smelled of forgotten flowers and stale prayers. Maya said, every hallway feels like someone's unfinished sentence. Noah said, then finish it. A nurse wheeled past with a patient, eyes lowered. Maya pressed the bracelet to her chest. She said, room 212. They stopped before a pale green door. Maya's breath rattled like keys dropped on tile. Noah said, I am here. She opened the door, and light bent toward the figure inside. Ruth lay on the bed, silver hair scattered like threads of moonlight. Maya whispered, she looks smaller, like grief folded her. Ruth's chest rose faintly. Maya said, she is still writing her sentence. Inside the room the machines hummed like reluctant companions. Maya said, Mom. Ruth's eyelids fluttered, then stilled. Maya gripped her hand and said, I carried your funeral, but you carried my name. Noah said, she breathes because she still has pages left. Ruth stirred faintly, lips quivering without sound. Maya said, I am here, I will not misplace you again. The monitor blinked like a stubborn candle. Noah said, grief told you she was gone, but grief lies loud. Maya's tears hit the sheet like punctuation. She said, they told me to forget, but forgetting is death. Ruth's fingers twitched, clinging weakly to hers. Maya whispered, then we begin again. Victor's voice erupted in the doorway like broken glass. Victor said, you had no right to come here. Maya said, I had every right. Noah said, you redacted truth until it bled. Victor said, she is better this way, untouched by your storms. Maya said, she is not your possession. Victor said, I signed papers when you collapsed in grief. Maya said, I collapse but I rise. Ruth's eyes fluttered again and a faint sound escaped. Victor said, she cannot hear you. Maya said, her fingers told me otherwise. Noah said, every lie ends in silence, and your silence is next. Victor's jaw clenched, fury and fear braided in his face. Maya said, Mom is not your control, she is my beginning. The administrator arrived with a folder that smelled like finality. Miss Harrow said, visitation remains limited. Maya said, limitation is not protection. Victor said, boundaries keep order. Noah said, control is not care. Ruth's eyelids fluttered, and the monitor argued with its own rhythm. Miss Harrow said, there is a pending transfer for specialized evaluation. Maya said, who requested that? Victor said, I did, with legal authority. Maya said, authority forged by fear. Noah said, show the consent. Papers slid out like pale fish. Maya said, this signature is not my mother's hand. Ms. Harrow said, then we pause and verify. Victor said, you are obstructing treatment. Maya said, I am restoring breath. Ruth's fingers twitched and found hers. The room felt smaller than the truth trying to enter. courtyard breathed damp earth, and vending machine coffee. Maya said, when he speaks, I forget my own volume. Noah said, I remember it for you. Wind combed the shrubs like a nervous usher. Maya said, I keep thinking I failed her twice. Noah said, you are here, and that breaks the count. She watched a sparrow bully a crumb. She said, do you ever fear loving a broken person? Noah said, I fear not loving honestly. The machines hummed like distant bees. Maya said, I am tired of armored sentences. Noah said, then try this one open. Her shoulder leaned into him, and the day softened. She said, if I fall, do not rescue me too soon. He said, I will fall beside you and call that rescue. Victor stood in administration like a lighthouse that refused to save ships. Miss Harrow said, the transfer file has inconsistencies. Victor said, inconsistencies are clerical dust. Maya said, dust buried my mother once. Noah said, we refuse another burial by paperwork. A copier rattled like anxious teeth. Miss Harrow said, I require fresh consent and a physician review. Victor said, delay invites decline. Maya said, decline began with secrecy. Noah said, transparency is treatment. A junior clerk hovered with a notary stamp that wanted purpose. Victor said, you do not understand history. Maya said, history is why I am loud now. The clock judged everyone with even ticks. Miss Harrow said, the transfer is frozen until signatures breathe. The diner across the road smelled like buttered resolve. Dr. Shaw said, panic inflates time until you forget to breathe. Maya said, he keeps shifting ground under my feet. Dr. Shaw said, name the ground and stand anyway. Noah said, guardianship papers are ready if needed. Dr. Shaw said, do not lead with threat, lead with clarity. Maya said, clarity hurts before it helps. Dr. Shaw said, pain is the invoice for meaning. The waitress poured coffee that looked braver than they felt. Maya said, I want love without apology. Noah said, then keep the apology for the lies you will not host. Dr. Shaw said, call me if the gate moves again. Maya said, it moves every hour. Dr. Shaw said, then so do you. Night stitched itself to the west wing and left the seams visible. Miss Harrow said, I received a call authorizing a midnight transport. Maya said, from whom? She answered, a private physician retained by Victor. Noah said, we have the freeze notice. The elevator chimed like a verdict. Orderlies rolled a gurney that smelled of rubber and haste. Maya said, no one touches her without my consent. Victor stepped from the shadows and said, this spares her confusion. Maya said, confusion is kinder than erasure. Ruth's lips shaped an air word and vanished. Maya said, she said home. The hall quieted as if the building listened. Miss Harrow said, transport cancelled pending verification. Victor said, you choose chaos. Maya said, I choose her. The file cracked open like a confession too long withheld. Maya said, these signatures tell different stories. Noah said, one is forged. Miss Harrow said, the physician is not on our registry. Victor said, he was retained privately. Maya said, privately means secretly. Noah said, fraud blooms in secrecy. The room's air tasted metallic. Maya said, this page proves my mother was transferred under false orders. Victor said, you misunderstand logistics. Maya said, I understand theft. Ruth stirred faintly, as if echoing. Miss Harrow said, I will report this anomaly. Victor said, anomaly or not, she belongs here. Maya said, she belongs where truth breathes. The chapel smelled of wax and old forgiveness. Maya said, I buried a stranger here, didn't I? Noah said the coffin carried a lie. She knelt at the altar and said, I want to return her name. Candles hissed like unwilling witnesses. Victor appeared at the back and said, names are labels. not lifelines. Maya said, names are anchors, and you cut mine. Noah said, you exploited grief for control. Victor said, I offered order where chaos ruled. Maya said, chaos at least tells the truth. The candles flickered, as though agreeing. She pressed her mother's bracelet against her chest and whispered, forgive me for accepting silence. The archive smelled of mold and secrets. A clerk said, these files predate digital entries. Maya said, then paper will tell the truth. She sifted yellowed forms until one trembled under her hand. She said, Ruth Collins, admitted under Hale Consolidated sponsorship. Noah said he built a prison out of contracts. The clerk said, this one carries initials that match Victor Hale. Maya's throat clenched like a fist. She said, he signed her into silence. The clerk said, you can request audit copies, but risk is real. Noah said, risk is cheaper than lies. Maya said, truth costs more, but I'll pay. The rooftop hummed with the city's pulse. Maya said, he caged her with ink. Noah said, paper chains still break. Victor said, you think discovery frees her, but trauma does not vanish with proof. Maya said, it vanishes with love and light. Wind tangled her hair as though urging her onward. Victor said, you are naive. She said, I am awake. Noah said, control is loneliness disguised. Victor's silence felt heavier than speech. Maya said, Ruth is not your legacy. She is my blood. He said, blood betrays. She said, not when it chooses courage. His face cracked, not with tears but with the threat of them. The bedside became a courtroom of breath and memory. Maya said, Mom, I found you. Ruth's lips parted faintly, shaping a syllable. Victor said, she cannot recover enough to know you. Noah said she already does. Ruth's eyes glimmered wetly. Maya said, say my name. Ruth's whisper rasped, Maya. The sound collapsed every wall she'd built. Maya wept, you're here. Victor stepped back as if struck. He said, you don't know what survival cost me. Maya said it cost her life. And mine. Noah said your empire ends where her voice begins. Ruth's fingers tightened weakly in Maya's palm, choosing truth over silence. The conference room felt like a courtroom with cheaper chairs and brighter blame. Miss Harrow said, we convene to resolve custody and consent. Maya said, I claim temporary guardianship with this affidavit. Victor said, her decisions risk harm, mine ensure stability. Dr. Shaw said, stability without consent is clinical coercion. Noah said, we have proof of forged orders and a frozen transfer. The blinds sliced the sun into bars that fell across patience and pride. Maya said, I choose evaluation at Riverside with a trauma-focused plan. Miss Harrow said, we can authorize with signatures and a physician note. Victor said, you will shatter what little she has. Maya said, she will choose light, and I will carry the cost. The alarm split the wing like a siren, pouring nails into a bucket. A nurse said, oxygen saturation falling. Maya said, Mom, stay with me. Noah said, we have the new consent. Call Riverside now. Victor hovered as if anchored by a rope burned into his hands. Hey, Dr. Shaw said, slow breath, slow tone. She hears rhythm more than volume. Ms. Harrow said, I can clear transport if a physician signs. The monitor stumbled, then steadied like a frightened runner. Maya said, proceed with non-invasive support and immediate transfer. The nurse said, order placed, respiratory en route. Hope returned on tiny shoes that still knew the hallway. In the supply alcove, Victor stared at the tiled wall as if it were a ledger. Victor said, your mother asked me to stop you from seeing her decline. Maya said, she asked for love, not disappearance. Victor said, after the funeral planning, you broke, and I broke with you. Maya said, I needed truth and you chose pity dressed as power. Victor said, I thought I could spare you the worst page. Maya said. The worst page is the one you never read. He pressed the bridge of his nose and the mask finally loosened. Victor said, I withdraw my objections. Sign what you must. Maya said, then sign here so the door opens cleanly. He signed like a man admitting the storm had his name on it. Paper rustled like small birds learning a storm language. Miss Harrow said, authorization to transfer to Riverside Care, effective now. Dr. Shaw said, ambulance wheels in 10 minutes. Notify receiving team. Maya said, Noah bagged the files and the bracelet copies. Noah said, done. I will ride lead car and clear the route. The nurse adjusted the mask and kindness filled the room like oxygen. Maya said, Mom, we are taking you to a place that speaks gently. Ruth's eyes slid open and a tiny smile stitched itself to the moment. Dr. Shaw said, that is a response, not a reflex. Miss Harrow said, sign, here, here, and here, initials by the note. The pen moved steady, and the future moved with it. Dawn arrived with pale courage, and a siren parked at the curb. Paramedic said, we have her stable for transport. Maya said, I will ride in back and count every breath. Noah said, I will follow and call ahead if traffic stalls. Victor stepped closer and said, tell her I kept the lights on. Maya said, I will tell her I found the switch. The gurney rolled and wheels sang a thin hymn on tile. Ruth looked at the window and shaped the word home again. Dr. Shaw said, let that be your compass. Maya bowed over her and said, I am here, and here counts. The doors closed on panic and opened on motion. Riverside smelled of lavender polish and cautious beginnings. Maya said, this feels like a place that remembers names. A nurse said, patients here walk gardens when they can. Noah said, gardens beat locked doors. Dr. Shaw said, healing like sunlight more than silence. Ruth's chair rolled past a window where light spilled like forgiveness. Maya knelt and whispered, you are safe. Ruth's lips twitched, and the bracelet clinked like a bell marking presence. Victor lingered by the door, hands empty of authority. Maya said, you can stay, but you cannot steer. His eyes flickered toward Ruth, and his silence finally weighed less than the lie he once carried. The garden smelled of damp earth and second chances. Maya pushed the chair slowly, gravel crunching underfoot. She said, do you hear the birds, Mom? Ruth blinked, her eyes brighter than last week. Noah said they planted roses along the south wall. Dr. Shaw said, rituals of ordinary life repair fractures of memory. Maya said, this is ordinary enough to save me too. Victor followed with hesitant steps, as if each stone argued. He said, I thought silence was mercy. Maya said, mercy is sound, not absence. Ruth's hand brushed a rose petal, and for a breath, the air felt rewritten. Afternoon shadows leaned long across the therapy room. A therapist said, grip the ball, Ruth, then release. Ruth squeezed, fingers trembling but intent. Maya whispered, that is strength enough. Noah said, progress is still progress when it is slow. Victor leaned in a corner, arms folded but softer now. Dr. Shaw said, witnessing is a form of healing too. Ruth let the ball fall, then lifted her gaze toward Maya. She mouthed, daughter. Maya gasped. Say it again. The word hovered in the space like a feather refusing to drop, and everyone in the room felt its weight. Evening pressed amber light into the common room. Ruth rested with eyes half closed. Maya said, I feared I would never see you breathe peace. Ruth whispered, peace is heavy, but you carried me here. Noah said, you both carried each other. Dr. Shaw said, love can be a medicine sharper than steel. Victor sat near the window, finally still. He said, I tried to protect her and only built cages. Maya said, then stay now without cages. Ruth reached, her frail hand touching his for the first time in years. Victor's shoulders shook, silent grief rewriting him in small tremors. The night settled soft and final. Maya sat at Ruth's bedside, hand intertwined with hers. Ruth whispered, "Home." Maya said, "Yes, we are home." Noah stood at the doorway, watching like a sentinel who had chosen hope. Dr. Shaw closed her notebook and said, "Her journey continues now with love." Victor whispered, "Forgive me," though he aimed it at the floor. Maya said, "We already began forgiving when truth walked in." Ruth's breath slowed but steadied, her chest rising with fragile rhythm. Maya pressed her forehead to her mother's hand and whispered, "We will not fade again." The room answered with silence that felt eternal and kind.